What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some details about Atomfall, an upcoming survival action game set in 1950s Britain, in a quarantine zone specifically, after a nuclear incident that's playing host to a bizarre mystery. Now, this is a game that was announced relatively recently, but with Gamescom going on this week, they've finally shared a bunch more information. For starters, this game is actually slated for March of 2025, so not a terribly long time to wait for this one. And I thought it looked really interesting, so I wanted to make a video on it and talk about it a little bit. So first things first, this game is being developed by Rebellion, which, if you don't know, is the developer behind the Sniper Elite series, and clearly they wanted to do something a bit different with Atomfall here. So as I've already mentioned, this game takes place in Britain following a disaster in the 1950s. Now, apparently this is loosely based around a real story involving the world's first major incident like that. Now, as a result, the entire area has been put on lockdown, and our character, who is nameless, is simply trying to escape the quarantine. Now, one thing I thought was interesting right away is that they've said very deliberately that your character is meant to be sort of a mystery. There's no character creation, it's just this first-person view. You have no information about who you are. And supposedly, you're going to be able to find a little bit of your own backstory as you try to solve the mystery of what's going on here, because as quickly becomes apparent, there's something more to this quarantine than just a general quarantine. There's something else here, and some mystery afoot that is at the core of the game's story. And we're going to get to the bottom of it with a lot of open-world sandbox-type exploration, interacting with all sorts of factions, or simply murdering everybody who gets in your way. So, Rebellion is kind of known for their sandboxes, and Atomfall here will be no different. In fact, that seems to be what they've kind of stitched together on an individual base to make up the game's open world. Now, they said this was 5 or 6 different regions, give or take, and I'm not sure from the way they talked if you could walk from one of these to the other, or if these were separate loading screen open areas. Either way though, large open areas to explore and interact with in basically any way you see fit. They made it clear that it's possible to kill everyone and still beat the game, kill no one and still win, or choose a side. So another interesting thing about this, and where more of the RPG elements come in, is that there's going to be different factions with different ideologies, of course, and you'll be able to interact with them, and they might help you try to escape quarantine in turn. And you have to decide who's telling the truth, who you want to trust, who you don't want to trust. So they're clearly going for a very non-linear story here, where really you're just trying to get to the bottom of this mystery and get out of the quarantine. And how you get to that point is largely up to you, it would seem. And they want that journey to be accompanied by a bit of a desperate feeling to everything you do, kind of scrambling for guns and resources to set yourself up to actually survive some of this stuff. Because while on the surface of it, it's a relatively tame adventure with robots and humans, there's apparently going to be other more, let's say, sci-fi oriented type things afoot, though they were a little vague on the details there. And as you go around doing all of that stuff, you're going to uncover leads, and these leads are going to, of course, lead you to individual things you can learn and discover, and basically just give you more background and information about what's going on here. So, in the footage, we've also seen them talking to characters, having all sorts of different dialogue options, and one of the ways you interact with both of those systems is that they wanted conversations to feel like conversations, so you'll have to sort of take a guess at a person's personality and what they're trying to get out of you, etc. And if you say the wrong thing, they might clam up and withhold information from you, etc., etc. And that, combined with the faction system, I think will be interesting to see in motion and kind of see how all those pieces fit together. But as we move about the world doing all of that, there's a handful of systems to be aware of. Crafting and skills, importantly, as this is a survival game. The crafting, I would say, is basically a given, but there's also some proper RPG elements with things like a skill tree that will let you focus on things like melee weapons or guns, etc. But you are just one person, and the world is a dangerous place, as it were, if those robots are anything to go by. But I would say that sums up the bulk of what there is to know about this ahead of time. So now to share some opinions of my own. I would say this looks really interesting. I think the premise being loosely based on a real event is kind of cool. I was not aware of that. But I think what's really going to be the mark of success for this one is how interesting the story and the mystery they're trying to spin here actually winds up being. So you spend the entire game, of course, looking for answers, and what the answer to those searches happens to be alongside what you uncover along the way in terms of, say, your own character or whatever dastardly experiments I'm sure were taking place here winds up being will be all important, because A, if the story's uninteresting, then clearly that's no good, but also because of how some of these systems are supposed to work that they're talking about, all of this nonlinear stuff, how you can talk to people in various ways and they may choose to help you or not, or you may choose to help them or not, and how that plays into the story, and what any of these factions happens to actually know about what's going on in the quarantine, I think has the potential to set up some really interesting, like, big plot moments. And whether or not that stuff is there and how actually impactful it manages to be, I would say is probably what I would look forward to the most about something like this, with the other half of it though being the gameplay itself. So we have this big sandbox, and obviously that's again what Rebellion is known for, but how fun that sandbox is to interact with outside of just like leads and information, but rather what you can actually do in it is going to be all important. Like, say, can I use some of those leads to set up a situation where I can deal with large groups of enemies all at once, or say pit factions against each other, that kind of thing. I think that would add a lot to something like this as well, and that's something I just don't have information on at the moment. But for me at least, I think the combination of those stories and the mystery and the quality of it alongside how fun this world and sandbox is to interact with and what sort of things can you get up to will be ultimately the driver of success behind this particular title. But I am certainly interested in it. I think at a glance at least it looks like a lot of fun. And thus, this game is definitely on my list of games to look at next year for sure. But in the meantime, I certainly hope you enjoyed this video, taking a look at it. If you did, let me know down in the comment section below what you think about this one, or anything you might have thought of that I didn't, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.